Hey guys, JCross X here, and welcome back to the class overview series for our second episode. If you want to watch the first episode where we covered Dimitri's Great Lord and High Lord classes, we'll leave a link to that episode in the description below.
The class overview series is a series where we're going to be discussing the different classes in Fire Emblem Three Houses. We'll be going over general information about each class, like their certification requirements, stats, abilities, and their overall strength and limitations to determine their viability and what units are a good fit for each class.
As we said before, these videos will be gameplay focused, so there shouldn't be really any major spoilers, but I do advise to watch at your own discretion, as certain things may or may not be mentioned in passing. And again, if you haven't played Fire Emblem Three Houses, do yourself a favor and play the game.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Armored Lord class, along with its upgraded version, Emperor. This class is only usable in the Crimson Flower route, and therefore cannot be obtained unless you choose to teach the Black Eagle's house in Chapter 1, as well as making a couple pivotal decisions during Chapter 11. Obviously, Edelgard is the only unit who can use these classes, and rather than requiring any specific skill levels or seals for certification, Edelgard will automatically be certified for and reclass into Armored Lord after the Chapter 12 mission. However, unlike Dimitri and Claude's classes, you will not be forced to deploy Edelgard as an Armored Lord for Chapter 13 or any other map. This solidifies Armored Lord's role as a free but completely optional zero investment class.
So Armor Lord is a 5-inch removed class, which puts it in line with some other advanced classes like Swordmaster in terms of mobility. It has two abilities as well, being Axe Fair, which increases axe damage by 5, and then Charm, which increases the damage of adjacent allies by 3. These are identical to Dimitri's High Lord classes, just with Edelgard's signature weapon fair instead. Upon mastering Armor Lord, you get the ability Pop and Circumstance, which simply grants a +4 luck and +4 charm, as the same master as the first tier class leader unique classes. However, I think for this one, it might be a little bit more situational in Edelgard. If I'm not going to recommend it for Dimitri, I'm not going to recommend it for her either. Although the +4 luck might be good for her because she is a player phaser with no guaranteed crits, the charm is pretty much useless on her because, as I just said, she's a player phaser, and she won't really have to worry about hitting gambits too much, because her charm growth is incredibly high, and then she won't be getting hit by gambits as she is player phasing.
Armored Lord's base stats are surprisingly a bit better than the other unique house leader classes. It's still very likely you won't get any stat increases upon auto-certifying into it, but it's definitely possible you'll get a point or two of HP or defense because of the naturally high bases. While in this class, Edelgard receives a +5 modifier to both HP and defense, which is pretty significant for her prot tanking capabilities, as well as a standard +2 charm modifier that is shared among the house leader classes. These modifiers are serviceable, but there are some glaring flaws. First of all, in exchange for these large defense boosts, Edelgard takes a -3 penalty to speed. Second of all, when compared to his closest competitor Fortress Knight, while the speed penalty is less severe, Fortress Knight grants double the bonus defense with the same HP bonus, so the tankiness of Armored Lord ends up being a little subpar. As for skills, Edelgard gains a +3 growth modifier to Axe's Authority and Heavy Armor as an Armored Lord. The Axe and Authority growth are both good areas to grow in for higher Axe prowess levels and earlier access to A-rank battalions. And the Heavy Armor growth is decently useful to pick up weight -3, since the class lacks the innate weight -5 of Fortress Knight.
So lastly, in terms of the statistical analysis, we have to mention those growth rates. As an Armor Lord, Edelgard receives an additive 20% increase to her HP growth rate, as well as 5% for magic, defense, and res, with the last being 10% for her charm. These are actually a bit below average compared to other advanced classes that you will have available by this time, and one of the growths, being magic, is comically useless considering both Armor Lord and Emperor classes prevent Edelgard from using her spells. She does get access to two magic-oriented combat arts, being Hexblade and Lightning Axe, but these aren't without their problems. The first one, Hexblade, is a sword combat art, meaning it will rarely see any impactful use on her, and the other, Lightning Axe, would only really be useful against low-res enemies, many of which are armored, and you have Helm Splitter for that. The charm growth is nice, but again, Edelgard is not really lacking in that area. Overall, the stats of Armor Lord aren't bad at all, definitely to the point where it's a weakness of the class, but it definitely doesn't stand out, especially since, again, one of the growths is basically useless. If you're using a magical Edelgard for whatever reason, you're much better off just using Warlock, which has a 10% magic growth, and actually lets her use her spells. Combined with the fact that the class abilities are average at best, and you have a class that's missing that extra punch to make it stand out amongst the already strong list of advanced classes, aside from the animation, which are always a nice touch among the unique classes.
After the Chapter 15 mission, the Armored Lord class automatically upgrades an Emperor, which comes with a very small amount of improvements. The base stats are for some reason identical to Armored Lord, so there is no chance of receiving any stat increase from this auto-certification. While an Emperor, the speed penalty gets just slightly harsher at -4 in exchange for an increase from 5 to 8 for both the HP and defense modifiers. The only other stat boost is an inconsequential +1 boost to luck. As for growth rates, the HP and strength rates increase from 20% and 5% to 30% and 10%, which are dice changes. Strangely, the magic growth also increased to 10% to be equally in line with her strength. Unfortunately, all her other stats are unchanged, and notably she suffers from still being stuck at 5 move, while both of the other house leader classes receive an extra point of movement upon their upgrades. In summary, this upgrade is definitely disappointing. Compared to the other house leader classes, Emperor is easily the least impactful upgrade statistically.
The class abilities unfortunately remain the same, still having only Axe Fire and Charm. Just like Dimitri's Great Lord, Mastering Emperor grants access to unique personal combat art for Edelgard, being Flickering Flower, which can only be used while in the Emperor class. The combat art is an Axe combat art that costs only 3 durability and grants plus 10 might and plus 10 crit. The unique effect it has is preventing the target from moving after being hit, identical to the effect of the bow combat art in Closer. However, unlike in Closer, this combat art's effect is only marginally useful, since an Encloser user can stop enemies not in range of any of your units dead in their tracks, while Edelgard has to get in range of said unit to stop them from moving. At that point, you're better off just taking advantage of Edelgard's player phase capabilities, and if you need to stop enemy movement, take advantage of the dozens of strong gamuts available by this point in the game that you unlock Emperor. There's no real reason to use this combat art compared to the other options you have, such as Brave Axes, fishing for crits with Killer Axes plus Smash, or just going on an absolute rampage with a Mirror. Plus 10 might is strong, but by that time you master this class, you definitely will not be lacking damage on Edelgard, and as such, mastering Emperor is definitely not a priority, as although the combat art is okay, you are forced to stay in Emperor if you want to use it. At the very least, personal combat arts for classes don't take up space, so it doesn't hurt to master a class if you are going to end up using Emperor.
Overall, Armored Lord and Emperor are relatively weak classes with a few decent attributes. They come with Axe Fair, which is great because Axe is already such a powerful weapon type, and Edelgard in particular really appreciates having Axe Fair while wielding a mirror. The Prot Tank potential of the class is solid and a bit more balanced in terms of defense and resistance compared to other Prot Tank classes like Fortress Knight and Great Knight, which are usually instantly nuked by mages. However, this is where the strengths end. It only has 2 class abilities, and the class isn't a good fit to take full advantage of Charm, so usually Axe Fair is the only impactful ability. Its offensive capabilities don't really stand out in any way with its middling modifiers for the strength stat and growth rate. The main weakness of this class is the main weakness of armored classes in general, which is their lack of movement. The class is designed to be on the front lines tanking damage, and yet it will often be left behind all the flyers and other high mobility units, and will struggle to catch up for the entire map, especially on maps with difficult terrain. Specifically, Edelgard is a unit that excels in the player phase, making use of Death Blow, Darting Blow, and especially her unique combat art Raging Storm. All of this is far less effective without high movement, and just as importantly, access to Kanto. It can't be understated how much worse this class is for taking advantage of Edelgard's strengths as a unit compared to Wyvern Lord or even just Wyvern Rider, which are not even particularly difficult or high investment for Edelgard to go into.
Overall, I would give Armored Lord and Emperor a combined rating of 2.5 out of 10. That measly rating is because they don't stand out all in almost any regard and most certainly have some drawbacks. Just like Josh said, Edelgard is an amazing player phase unit, so putting her into an armored class that has very middling movement capabilities is unnecessarily inhibiting her insane strength. To me, it is baffling that they would give Edelgard the most broken player phase combat art on the best weapon type, and then give her a class that just gets outclassed by literally every other Axe Fair class in the entire game. It's not like they were obligated to make it an armor class either, since Claude gets a flying class, but Dimitri wasn't granted the luxury of a riding class to round out the trio of skills, so it just doesn't make any sense. Speaking of Dimitri, I will say that Armor Lord in particular, not Emperor, doesn't catch as much flack compared to Dimitri's High Lord class in one specific case. In that case is Chapter 13. The notorious Chapter 13 mission for the Azure Moon route does not match the Chapter 13 mission in Crimson Flowers, and as such, Edelgard isn't immediately forced into a battle without being able to reclass. So at the very least, if you never want to have to use this godforsaken class in a notoriously difficult map, you won't have to. If that is one of the only redeeming comments I can make regarding this class, then that should probably give you a solid understanding of how generally useful these classes are, as Emperor barely changes from Armor Lord. I mean, again, the base stats are literally the exact same. Although there are some niche scenarios we would recommend use High Lord and Great Lord in the last episode, for Edelgard, in good faith, I cannot recommend you ever use this class. The only exception is in the rare case where, for whatever reason, you have not bothered to invest into her at all, she at least gets free Axe Fair, which in my opinion is the bare minimum. Just save yourself the pain of using an armor class in 3 houses and get this girl on a Wyvern.
As for the tier list placement, I would put both Armored Lord and Emperor firmly in the D tier. They're not the absolute most useless class in the game. In fact, we may need an F tier later on for some of these other classes, but they're definitely a cut below High Lord and Great Lord, which are already mediocre classes. Edelgard's a strong enough unit that even if you use her in a terrible class like this, she'll still be one of your best units, but I'd really advise against it, especially on higher difficulties. as you're just making the game harder for yourself by doing so. That's about all there is to say about Edelgard's unique Armored Lord and Emperor classes. If you like the video or have any thoughts of your own, please leave a like and make sure to comment.
I also recommend checking the description if you're not already subscribed to both of our channels. Stay tuned for the third episode in the series where we round out the House Leader's unique classes with Claude's Wyvern Master and Barbarossa classes.